It won't be that long.
Oh, cool.
So you get to hear cool presentations.
Nice.
So they went over downstairs, so.
Cool.
I'm sure, I mean, all of you who are in this room know this, but this year for the Liberal Arts and Sciences essay contest, we asked students to submit work on the broad topic of human nature and society. We also expanded the type of work students could submit. So it was not just essays, but short stories, poetry, and some visual arts. So there's some students in here today who have submitted work. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just briefly describe your work or read excerpts from your work, your choice. Or you could do a little bit of both. And then after we hear from you guys who submitted, we do have prizes. We have a first prize, a second prize, and a third prize. And we also have other prizes for anybody else who has submitted. Okay? So, see, Lewis, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Yay!
Well, my work isn't actually very long. It's a poem that I wrote about thinking vis-a-vis tyrannical governments or governments that I would generally consider to be oppressive. And I compared this sort of government with a metaphor from Zeus. I remember that while I was taking Dr. Salter and Dr. Collins' class in world mythology last year, I remember doing a little bit of reading into Greek mythology and into Zeus in particular. And what I learned was that in Greek mythology, Zeus was considered to be the infallible sky god or the infallible regime. So this is my response to him through this poem. It's actually been published in the Tower. And I also used it as a submission into Dr. Prince's Dr. Prince's competition. If anyone has any questions about it or anything relating to the poem or any inspirations that I used, you're more than welcome to ask me. Again, the title is Zeus. Time tumbles all thrones, either through death or through senility. You misfire. The bolt pops before your feet, and all of Olympus crumbles. Marble pillar, granite statues standing with a seemingly permanent stance of your glory, all cracking and crumbling into pebbles, rolling down the mountain's spine. The mountaintop becomes a sandhill, then a stony patch of ruin of a kingdom. Your iron fists rusted in the growth of your subjects, all who've nibbled on the apples that you've condemned. You've salted my earth when I decided to chew, but even then, I still crunch down my fruit. The snake is no hero, but one tyrant is the same as another. So throw down all the boats you have left. Burn me with all the flames of Olympus. Send me the ravens to chew on me for my disobedience. Send me to your brother, the dark man toiling the hellfire behind this heaving Cerberus. Rulers are great, but time is greater. Reason and rust cripple both you and your throne. So go on. Leave your final scratches before the turn is yours to relinquish the bolts. A king clings to a scepter only for so long, and your grip is slipping. Time sifts through the waste of the hourglass. Your vision blurs, your hair whitens. Only time is infallible, O great god of sky. It is time that erodes your rule or your heart, or perhaps the fates will be the throne's finisher before the collapse of the final grain. The sky swirls, turning against its turner, takes his own bolts and smites him, breaks the skin of the hourglass, and the sand slides across everything. No more weight. Any time, any end will be the same. The scepter clatters at the foot of your throne, now eroding under a bloodied sky. The fire is known, the apple swallowed. No more roars thunder from the dusty mountaintop. Only one last whimper, a wheeze, a thud, before Olympus thunders nevermore.
Jordan, would you like to go now?
Here, I'll move it over to the side so more people can see it. So as the easel shows, I'm one of those alternative submissions. Mine being an art piece. I have glasses, so I know what it's like not to be able to see things. So if you'd like to be able to come up and look at it, feel free. Alrighty, so to begin, this is a realist piece, or rather an attempt, a drawing with the only inaccuracies having transferred from my negative 3.1 vision impairment and my decision to use graphite, give or take a few mistakes. In summary, this is what I see. It's exact as my elementary talent can translate to paper. The lines are measured out, placed ever so purposely to convince you not only of a level of skill, but of an actual place. But this place doesn't exist. No, I'm not trying to say that I came up with the scene on my own. I've had my fair share of sitting in chairs, walking around with the sky right above me, and my fair, experiences as a human being, just like all of you. Scenery, still life, and a combination of these experiences, rather an assumed perspective. And that's the title of this piece, is Assumed Perspective. And that's what it represents. You'll never find this image again. It was pieced together by memory, one that as humans we share and can recognize almost immediately. And this is why we call works of art an attempt at realism. I've never seen the flowers I've put in the pot. In fact, I made them up, so if I have discovered a new species, let me know. But via assumed perspective, there they are. I imagine that they come in a deep pink or red, with streaks of white lining the edges. But for you all, that may be different. After all, it is black and white. But from a survey I took of 3 people and a 5-year-old, they're red. The point of the matter is that none of this is certain. I see a chair, but what if you don't? What if the message is not conveyed, and instead this piece is a drawing of a dog and 3 balloons? It's a very real worry of mine, you see. Not everyone sees the same thing. And as I'm sure you know, as this is liberal arts, and we do deal with a lot of iffy issues. See, I've sat in chairs. I've felt them, and I've drawn them, and I've even built one once. But what if to someone somewhere there is no chair? It may seem like a silly thing to get anxious over, but at the end of the day, this is just a sheet of paper. There's no texture, nowhere to sit, and there isn't even color. How in the world is that a chair? But it's not, you see, it's only an opinion. My opinion, my perspective, and my assumption of what a chair is. But to 39 million people across the world, this is a piece of paper. Not a chair, not a drawing, but a piece of paper. You can sit down a blind person and try to explain to them what you see in this, but that's an invasion of their perspective. Putting your assumptions of what this paper is and is not, now you've broken into someone else's assumptions. But you have a point. There is a chair in this picture. There's a chair and flowers and a misplaced, misspelled Italian restaurant. They don't exist. Not in our world, they don't. They are a patched-up version of reality I've thrown together over the past 2 weeks, a child, in a sense, of my perspective. And yes, you and I may share some common views about it, including the objects within it and the material used, but for those who don't agree, or rather share in our oppression, or our impression, what then? I encourage you, all of you, to take a ride up the elevator. It's just 1 floor, up to the 3rd floor, actually, to our humble university museum. If you take a right, you'll find the Shelby and Donald Rubin Gallery, where a series of portraits are on display, accompanied by the subject's assumed perspectives, similar to this. These individuals are what we call visually inspired. They suffer from a disorder of sight, but that's only what we've labeled them. They have been born with, at some point in their life, having developed a disorder that alters their vision. So it's not exactly what you and I see, or rather, it's not what any of us see, since we never see the same thing. What we label as tunnel vision or imagination is their world, and similarly, this is mine. The end.
Christopher, would you like to go next?
When I signed up for all this, I didn't expect to have to read it because both of them were kind of personal, but it's okay, I'll get over it. I submitted 2 pieces, one of which I actually wrote for Morgan Brennan for her Campus Movie Fest. It's entitled Sun. And then I guess I can just talk about that and read, since it's the smaller one of the other one. Sun, essentially, when I was writing this, I was going through a lot with my father. I was raised in a single parent at home, and my dad kind of came in at the last minute and tried to do as much as he could for me. But as bad fathers typically do, they can't hold up to their promises. And this kind of was a dream I had about something that I would like my dad to say, but he may not ever say to me. So, son, I hear you've hit some pretty hard times. I hear that in the midst of your blossoming, you've encountered a small stint along the road and believe you cannot prevail. I know this feeling, boy, trust me. You are not alone in this fight against the statistics that daily arm themselves against people like us. People born into a world with dreams far larger than their bank accounts may seem to allow. But boy, you have to realize this one trick to life. There's no power on this earth, no bill statement too staggering, and no piece of literature as compelling as the potential of your spirit. There is no resource in this dimension or the next that can overcome the spark that is deep within you. And your greatest failure is not having less cash. Your greatest failure is not having less cash in your wallet than the next guy. Nor is it walking to the subway station when someone else is driving. Nor is it cringing in shame when you hear all the things others do with money that you presently cannot. It's giving up, like I once did, on doing the right thing and giving up on your resolution to the ease of conformity. You are the hope, son, the phoenix rising from the ashes of your predecessors. You are destined to take the reins of countless fortunes never allowed to your forebears. I know it, for my spirit whispers of your greatness. Your eyes, since the moment I first saw you, enunciated a sweet prophecy for me, my boy, that you would have all that I could not, that you would carry on, and when greeted with the same obstacles as myself, you would elevate inflamed wings, vaporizing statistics and smoldering presumptions of who we are, where we come from, and our inevitability. Please, do not give up. You have the power of all before you and the support of everyone in your present if your spirit ever falters. Money is nothing, but your core is priceless. Keep your flame and nothing can stop you. And then my other piece, it's entitled Mirrors. I wrote it for Dr. Terry last year for her creative writing class. It's a pretty long piece, but it's basically a depiction of my first instance of seeing domestic abuse. So, yeah.
If I missed anyone, I think everybody we had more submissions than this, but not everyone came to present their submissions. But I'm going to ask Ann Salter, who was her brainchild to have this essay contest, and she's going to award the prizes. Would you like me to get the other?
Well, I want to thank Dr. Prince for organizing this contest, and Dr. Peters also, who could not be here today because she's at a conference. But she wanted to wish everyone well and thank you. So we had a panel of judges made up of faculty and staff, and they were very impressed with all the entries, and they decided that I'll give third place first. Third place is Yankee Book Peddler, and it's a $50 gift certificate. And that one goes to Luis. Congratulations. And our second prize winner is not here today. But the second prize is Hollinger Metal Edge, and it's a $100 gift certificate to their company to get products from their company, which is very nice. And first prize goes to Jordan Michaels. And this is a $200 from Better Book Getter in New York City, who is our favorite book vendor for the library. Thank you. Thank you. And everyone else that entered gets a prize from Yankee Book Peddler. So if you're here and you entered, please raise your hand.
I think everybody who entered are. Oh, you did. Okay.
Are you ready? You know where you are? Okay, I think we'll start. This is the course in creative writing, and that means we do a number of genres, poetry, prose, mostly, but other kinds of forms as well. And I think this semester we've had a very good learning experience, and I think the students have really bonded into a community, which I think I always love that, and it's to their credit, and I'm very proud of them, the ones that are pretending, the ones that are going to be speaking, and the ones that are not, some of whom are here. So, with no further ado, I think we can go ahead and start reading.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex Fallon. I know the program says I'll only be reading one piece, but we had to fill up a bunch of time, so I'm actually going to be reading two, but don't worry, they're both short. And this first one's called The Card Game. Burn Black King, burn Red King. Fuck the suit. The suit doesn't matter. Burn Black 10. Let's start with 1. Call. Yehuda lifts the edges of his 2 cards with shaking hands. He sees another king and a 7. 3 kings. Watch the tell. Control the tell. He looks up at Jack. Jack looks back at him. Eyes clear. Left edge of his lips slightly upturned. Teeth hidden. Levi and Boris sit on either side of Yehuda, smoking foul cigars, the only kind they can afford. Levi is small and jerky, similar to Yehuda. He comes from Russia too, but Yehuda does not know where. Boris is rounder, keeping some fat over the massive amounts of muscle despite the amount of food he gets. He comes from Leningrad, a fact he proudly presents, although to him it will always be Peter. Petersburg, no saints here, no saints in St. Louis. I raise, Yehuda says, attempting to keep his voice level. He slides 2 ragged dollar bills into a pile in front of him. Boris coughs up smoke and spits at the far corner of the room. Ah, too rich for me. Peter men know when to fight and when to quit. He leans back in his chair and blows a reeking smoke ring towards the naked bulb above him. Jack, the one American amongst Russians, yet always at home, looks calmly at Yehuda. Well, Jack says, begins to slide a bill forward. Americans like me never learn to quit, not like you Ivans back in the war. We have revolution, Levi exclaims, throwing down his cards. We die at home, and you say we cowards? Come now, no offense meant. Jack lights a cigarette, which he holds in a homage or mockery to his Russian friends, between thumb and forefinger as opposed to the crook of his middle finger. That was a long time ago, Yehuda mutters. He scratches a fingernail against his 2 cards. Show the next card. Jack reaches for the deck of cards. Right as ever, Huda, right as ever. He flips one over. Burn, Black 7. Jack watches Yehuda's eyes carefully. He sees them widen ever so slightly. Jack casually puts $1 into the pot and sits back expectantly. Boris sits smoking and unsuccessfully trying to clean his long nails. He largely ignores the game, his part in it done for now. Levi sits hunched forward, his arms folded on the table, shiftily eyeing Jack and Yehuda. Full house. Bring the pot back to the house. The full house. Focus. Raise, Yehuda picks up $4 bills and places them into the center of the pot. Psh, big man, mumbles Boris. Big man indeed, Jack mutters. His eyes rest lower than Yehuda's and gaze upward from dark sockets, earmarks of too little sleep. Let's see what the big man can do. He puts 3 of his own dollars on the pile, readjusting the cuffs of his worn jacket as he lets the bills fall. Moment of truth, Yehuda. Jack picks up the first card. Burn it. Bring me something to take back. Let some saint come. Jack places a red queen, a queen of hearts, next to the 7. Well, Huda, it's do or die. Let's start with 4, how's about? Jack puts the bills in the pot. Levi shakes his head quickly, warning against the bet. Boris spits out smoke. Yehuda looks down at his now meager stack of bills. 10 left, only 10. But if it brings in more, it could be worth it. But if it goes wrong, it's all gone. But the full house, the one here, the one there, the full house can make the other house a little easier. I raise 2, Yehuda says, nervously placing 6 bills in the center. Jack considers the offering. Let's go a bit higher. I'll see that 2 plus another 2, how's about? Yehuda looks down at the money in front of him again. Can't go back now. Too far in. Take the rush. Take it. Have to now. Yehuda pushes the rest of his money forward. His fingers tremble. All right, Jack claps his hands. No fun without a little risk, isn't that right, boys? Levi looks away. Boris ignores him. Let's see that hand, Huda. Come on, guess first. Yehuda turns over his cards, revealing his king and 7. Full fucking house, Jack crows, rushing the cigarette smoke out of his lungs. Well, son of a bitch. Levi stares at Yehuda's cards incredulously, a smile playing on the corners of his lips. Even Yehuda begins to smile, laughs a little. He lets the victory calm his hands, and he reaches for the pot. Hold on, Jack motions with his hands, sucking in on the cigarette. Let's be gentlemen here. Let's be sportsmanlike. Shouldn't I have the chance to show my hand? Yes, of course. Yehuda waves his arms forward, still flooded with adrenaline and pride. The smile that almost graced Levi's face drains away. Jack slickly flips his cards to reveal a king, the final king, and another queen. Kings full of queens. Now, if that isn't a clusterfuck, I don't know what it is, Jack laughs to himself, quickly raking the pot toward him. Levi looks contemptuously at Yehuda and gets up from his chair, walking out of the front door of the apartment. Yehuda sits in shock. All his money, the money the shop made over 2 weeks, gone forever. Big men should stay at home, Boris says. The foul cigar burned down to his stump, still stuck in his teeth.
Is everyone here in the back? Yes. Good, thank you.
Okay. Then one more. This one's only 2 pages. It's short. It's called Try Me. All I can think of are questions. I don't know you now, and we never spoke then. I knew the way you looked, always awkward, standing out. Knowing somebody, in this case seeing someone, at age 11 is the worst time to know someone. I saw your buzzed haircut, that mark of a male child in a southern summer, shearing away excess as if we were sheep. I saw your gangly legs, and your head too big for your body, and your nose too big for your face. I don't know if you grew into it. I don't know if you grew at all. I remember your movements on the pitch, your slow jog, knees bent inward, meek and timid. When the ball would come to you, you would weakly kick at it, maybe dribbling for a minute with your arms tucked close to your chest before someone bigger and faster took it from you. 2 kinds of people stand out when you're that young, the ones that beg to be noticed and the ones that beg not to be. I should have been more sympathetic to you, being of the latter sort myself, although maybe it's less about wanting to be invisible, wanting the things people notice to be invisible. While other kids laughed, yelled, you stayed silent, and when you did speak, it matched your gait, quiet and meek. Your face seemed to make up in a constant flush, as if you were embarrassed to be here. Is that what you felt? Embarrassment? Pain? I'm asking you now, but I doubt you'd even know. Do mothers let their 11-year-old sons read a father's suicide note? All I can think of are questions I don't know how to ask then. The side whisper from my mother, John's father killed himself, comes back to me now, and I don't know what to do with it. What do you think of him? How he left you? Is he the bastard that left you to fend for yourself, or the poor soul you miss every day? Is he both? At least I hope you didn't follow him. I hope that wasn't your way out, because kids can rip at you. Maybe they're malicious or maybe they're self-conscious, but they do it all the same. Did they say he didn't love you and that's why he left? Did he think of the burden his death would cause you? I hope he did, because you'll have it forever. I hope that if or when they cut into you, you don't respond by drawing in and shutting out. We're all trying to see what we're made of, and I hope you don't think that's the only path you can take. I hope you can say, try me, motherfucker.
Hi, my name's Morgan, and the following are 2 excerpts from what I hope to be a novel that I can complete. It's about a girl who must overcome adversity to realize her destiny following her expulsion from university and save her lost sister teleported into 1860s Georgia by a time crypt she explored. I wrote this to explore the ramifications in modern times of Black women's oppression and sexual exploitation during slavery. Black femininity was deemed exotic, and this over-sexualized or over-sexualization still haunts Black women today. Through the sisters, I show this perpetuation. Charlie facing adversities as a Black woman in modern times, and Indigo facing slavery in the 19th century. The name of the novel is Born Lost. Born Lost excerpt, Indigo. Sorry if I'm like shaky. I don't talk good in front of people. All right. Sorry. All right. The dark gives me terrible frights, but there is no light here. And yet in the eerie shadows of this grandiose place, I find emotional opulence. The walls are thick, impenetrable even for the apparitions that haunt my steps. There is always a bay window, because the moonlight draws my soul to dance in her glory. Here I sit condemned to moral wilderness, free from rule or guidance. My destitute sanity lying on the table, grasping for redemptive capabilities. But like so many things, I've left it all behind me. As the moonlight bathes my bare skin in a terrifying smile, the stone exterior cracks. I am not really here, just in control. It has been so long since we've spoken, but silence like darkness has become an estranged friend. I descend the spiral staircase. Chiffon black slithers in my wake. The heated logs burn and creak brilliantly in the distance, assisting the moon's beams as the only light in this massive prison. Refuge. The two become blurred as my alienation from society is consummated. I'm transfixed on the wild flames, and an ancestral drum beats in my chest. The master of the house imprisoned me in a cottage sheltered by trees of the forest in secrecy as his child grows inside of me. Before I know it, the flames of the fireplace have been freed and spew from the hearth, plush carpet. The fire whispers its intensity into my ears. Death caresses my cheeks, and I welcome his company. As the fire rages on, I rise from my cot in a cold sweat. The candlelight jumps beside me. Fear swells up as I run through the thicket of trees in my mind, faster and faster until they are but a blur in my periphery. Grabbing the disturbed candle by my bedside, I slip into the hallway, aligned with impenetrable red velvet. The room of books is cracked ever so slightly, tempting me in ways I cannot resist. Sweat pours from my face as I feverishly scribble words decisively on the parchment beneath me. Dear sister, the walls are closing in on me fast, and I fear this shall be our final correspondence. My heart has at last succumbed to the pitch black of fear that engulfs this abyss of unspeakable atrocities. My body is no longer my own. My soul has left me long ago. I cannot bear another night of his drunken savagery or another day of his wife's burning resentment. These walls hold secrets that would break the most vile sinner's heart and bring tears to a man whose emotions are concrete. The river calls me home, and in my death I shall find sanctuary. The flame gasps as a gust of outside wind intrudes on the breathless hallway. Massive footsteps assault the stairs and stumble awkwardly. The ever-presence of fear nestles in the pit of my stomach. The memories of many nights haunt me, and the familiar taste of leather straps and the smell of brandy help me find an ounce of courage, the only ounce I need as I bound from the window to the freedom in the dark of night. And this is the final excerpt. This is an excerpt from Charlie. An appeal to the committee was in order. The hour was budding. The darkness had fallen, when the clicking of my heels rained upon the pavement. A blue shadow cast between the spaces of light tracing the path. Rain had previously fallen, leaving the taste of early morning dew on the tip of barely awakened taste buds. A lazy wind blows the smell of fresh-cut grass, slicing the path of my inhale. All black clothing adorns my body, hugging me tightly for the first time in weeks. My face is swaddled in massive black cloth, covering me like a mother's arms around her child. The weight of the door is no struggle as hot palms embraced cool brass and dislocated it from the hinges. The air in the room tastes stale, in serious juxtaposition to the sweet tinge of dawn. The windows are draped in velvet over seasoned glass. They are massive, the drapes. Moonlight doesn't dance here. I tap my heel with force, and silence meets the vibration. A long oak desk sits aloft on a spot-lit stage that holds 3 chairs, everything else on the stage untouched by light. Below, 1 chair with 1 light. I stand. Miss Blackstone, it is brought to the committee that you intend to appeal the decision erstwhile made. Is this correct? His voice dripped like molasses with the weight of condescension. Excuse me. As his gaze strolled across the black cloak, an indignant castigation replaced disinterest as they rest upon ink-scorched knuckles. I don't flinch. This is correct, Chancellor. The raspy tenor of my voice breathes poise devoid of arrogance. The committee has reviewed your case and has deemed the aforementioned action of expulsion an appropriate reprisal for your actions. As such, the committee unanimously voted to deny your appeal. His gavel is lifted precisely, but my voice catches the clang of finality. It is stated, Mr. Chancellor, in Section 32, Article 4 of the Eden Constitution, that in such a case I am permitted to deliver an auditory appeal before the committee, before my case is decided. I will have my right to speak be recognized, esteemed members of the committee. The room doesn't breathe. 1 click, 2 clicks, before the wired-haired woman at the end gives me the floor. I draw in a breath, heavy as a burlap sack, and my gaze trails as time rewinds relentlessly. Many stories begin with a broken heart. Mine is no different, but it was broken from the start. Little jagged pieces too maimed to mend. Maybe I could start again. I I seek love with the fervor of a mealless man. The hunger for it ravages my body, for I crave it with insatiability. When I met the boy, I was spiraling into darkness as I always was, and I reached up to his open hand as a sinner does his Savior. My greatest error was laying my naked body into the palms of his hands, a human sacrifice so beautifully damaged. He loved and condemned me, sheltered and exposed me, saved and destroyed me. My limbs outstretched, the nails drove through mingled flesh, exposing deep red streams. I could smell him the entire time of my persecution, and still I clung to him with desperation that hunger never satisfied. My fate was sealed with each nail that drove through bone, and as my body was penetrated for the first time, I felt everything. He whispered into the depths of my soul and opened me with a precision seen in surgery. There was no protest when his large rough hand ruptured the impenetrable rib and tore my beating heart from my chest. It took 2 years to lift the massive oak that held the vessel that was my body. After 2 years, the oak stood upright, and everything I felt had crystallized, leaving only pain of tremendous proportions. It was there, beneath the light of the moon in obscurity, that he left me, bleeding and heartless. All hope vanished with him, and again I felt nothing. That is when she came. A wild figure in the night, she cut me free from the oppression of depression and held my shivering body. You're free now. She stroked me, and I crumbled to pieces and dissolved into ash that covered her thoroughly. I was a shell of my former self after the body. I was a specter in the grand scheme of things. My gaze remains fixed on a tiny crevice of light that had penetrated the burly drapery. Who is this she that you speak of? The Chancellor is piercing me with his glare, but only my periphery catches his focus. Indigo. As her name escapes my lips, I feel a sharp pain tug at the empty cave in my chest. Much like an amputated limb, any movement or use of the barren area causes a sensation of pain as if it still remains. They are whispering and writing, most likely about my insanity. But if they knew the whole story, terror would suspend their judgments.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I know that the program says that Elizabeth is supposed to go next, but we're changing things up on you, so strap in. All right, this piece is called On Being a Woman. Jane goes to her first funeral when she is 6 years old. It's for her grandmother, whom later Jane will only remember as a frail figure in a hospice facility that always smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol. For the rest of her life, the scent will remind her of gray frizzy hair and a pink bathrobe. Her parents tell her that children shouldn't wear black at funerals, so her mother buys her a dress that is the color of the evening sky just after the sun has set. She knows that Grandma died of something called cancer, a word that every adult says with a hush in her presence, like a prayer in church. It becomes a mumbled chant among the mourners, the chorus of a hymn that's verses are a cluster of I'm sorries. She watches the coffin be lowered into the ground with a mute fascination over the neat perfection of the rectangular hole. She joins her parents in throwing a handful of dirt onto the coffin and makes the mistake of wiping her hand on her dress, leaving a stain that takes 3 washes to erase. It ends up not mattering because after the funeral, Jane refuses to wear the dress ever again, even for nice parties and school pictures. She claims that it always smells like dirt. Jane is 12 when she first learns what cancer really is. The crash course begins with the discovery of a growth in her mother's ovary. Doctors perform surgery to remove not only the invaded organ, but all of her mother's reproductive organs, just to be safe. After the operation, her mother cries because this means no more children. The doctors are too late, though, because tumors begin to swell into existence in her mom's pancreas. Jane imagines them popping up, one by one, like mushrooms on a log. In the back of her head, she thinks about how unfair it is that her mother still has to deal with an ugly scar and be sick. Her mom has to go to the doctor every month for chemotherapy, a process in which the doctors inundate her with radiation to try and kill the disease in her. But her mom's body and the cancer are so intertwined that the chemo seems like it's killing her along with the tumors. For the first year, her mother bears it with a smile. She wears colorful scarves on her head like a woman from some exotic island country and attends a weekly support group in the hospital's chapel where she meets the loveliest people. But the combination of the killing chemo and the rotating cast of dying friends begins to take its toll, and when she is 14, Jane realizes that cancer consumes a person long before it kills them. She is 16 when she helps her father bury her mother, who died incoherent on a morphine drip in the ICU. She finds herself obsessing over every detail, like a bride planning her wedding. Her father sits in his old green recliner, a sunken version of himself, while she paces around the house with her cell phone, making decisions about flowers, a grave plot, venues, caterers. She wears the same black dress that her mother wore to Grandma's funeral, and she takes her place having her hand pressed by sad-eyed relatives in black versions of their Sunday best. Together in the cemetery, they look like a murder of crows. This time, Jane wears the dress for days after the funeral, convinced that it holds the last trace of her mother's scent, vanilla with a hint of palm oil, even though she knows realistically that for months before her death, her mother only smelled of rubbing alcohol and vomit. 5 months later, there is no one to hold her hand while she cries through her first heartbreak. At 17, she makes her own first appointment with a gynecologist to start birth control. At 18, she goes shopping for a prom dress with a friend and her mother. Jane is 21, alone and single on New Year's, the ruffled dark blue party dress she was supposed to wear draped next to her on the couch. She drinks champagne and watches the Times Square broadcast alone in her small apartment, so cramped that sometimes she comes home to the feeling of being buried alive. She broke up with her boyfriend 2 weeks ago after he told her that he wouldn't stay with her if she got a double mastectomy. Jane tried to explain her family's genetics to him, the risk of cancer, her regular screenings, the advantage of a preemptive strike, but all he could comprehend was the abomination of a woman without breasts. She looks down at her chest, trying to imagine it flat with 2 ragged scars on either side of her sternum. She remembers that she got her first real bra just 1 week before her mother was diagnosed. She thinks about a phalanx of festering cells falling into formation and dividing until they form the dreaded lump, a malignant mountain corroding the tissue around it. On the TV, the camera pans out on the crowd, a mass of scarves and parkas chanting, "Soon, soon." Sighing, Jane takes another sip of champagne, a shot of fizz straight from the bottle, and turns her attention back to the TV, watching the clock count down.
Sup, guys? I'm Ashley. I'll be reading 2 pieces, even though, the directory says I won't be, because we're all going against that today. Okay, my first one is called Anna's New Home. She pauses, nods, stoops beneath the low, hanging ceiling of a teeming imagination. There is an incessant buzzing within the walls. Anna emerges from the passageway and is enveloped in the velvet black traffic of a young mind. This is the place, she thinks to herself. This is my home. The words reverberate around her. One body, one mind. She lays a bony hand to her chest and sighs as a frail flutter starts from within. Time for work. Anna quickly unloads her bags, dumping stacks of books and crumpled papers to the floor. Obsessive-compulsive reads one, detail-oriented the other. As the stacks grow larger and larger, the blackness is filled. Shelves and compartments build themselves into the walls. Soon there is a library unfolding, dedicating sections to numbers and fears and food. Every label and category that a young disorder could ever wish appearing and ready to be sorted. Sort she did. For the next few years, Anna sorts the compartments of her house perfectly. She spends every waking moment dusting, cleaning, above all, counting. She sees through the eyes of the mind and counts. Mailbox numbers, license tags, pens, steps, calories. Anna counts it all. And she doesn't stop there, no. After the counting comes the recounting, and after the recounting, the recording, and after the recording, the memorizing. Day in and day out, Anna works feverishly to fill her new home with stacks and stacks of perfect order, knowing full well that if a spark were to occur, the velvet would ignite and be consumed. But in a way it already had. What are you doing? She knew the voice before she turned around, and there it was, the spark. Anna froze. What is all of this? It repeated. The owner of the voice of the home stood stock still, curious, watching Anna intently. All the boarder could do was reach down, take up one of the perfectly stacked record books, and place it into the spark's hands. Today's meals, it read, and the other one trembled as she flitted through the lists. I think you should go. Anna looked up, stunned. After all this time, after all her hard work and effort, her home was getting rid of her? It was inhumane. It was heart-wrenching. It was a mistake, Anna breathed. You are making a mistake. The other inched closer, raised her eyebrows in question. Without me, Anna said, you are nothing. Without me, you are out of control. Without me, you have no thoughts here in this velvet black abyss. I'm your best friend, your only hope, and your only solace. Oh, the spark whispered, both in denial and in fear. Why is that? Anna paused, licked her lips. Because I created you. The second one is called Tomatoes. I like tomatoes. She sits staring at the half-empty plate of acid. I know what she's thinking. Once alive, once dead, once handled. Now here, resting peacefully in their shallow ceramic grave, they wait. Tomatoes. Even if they had tasted good, she wouldn't have touched them, and she knows that. I do that. But there is something so heavy about the fact that they died not to taste good at all. They died not for joy, for use, or for life, but for disorder. She pushes the grave away, and I nod. She lays her shovel down and looks up. It's not the people she watches, but the graves. Empty graves, full graves, graves half disturbed and spilling dirt to the ground. Her eyes water at the sight, and I place a cool hand to her thoughts. They can't feel anymore, I whisper, attempting a tone we both know I can't pull off. Neither can I, she breathes. I retreat. Allow the body to grab an interred taste while the final mind lays to rest, let alone peacefully. The chairs are crowded. Bodies both larger and smaller than hers sit in oblivious comfort, chirps and caresses and tomatoes. What do they mean? I grind my teeth as she digs nail after nail into her palm. They aren't in control like we are. I realize she's shaking, and I claw my way to the front of her mind. They aren't happy like us. This? She lowers her head, knowing but reluctant to accept the fact that she is so obviously arguing with an empty seat. This is happiness? Of course. She closes her eyes. What else is there? Reopen. Carnage, blood, tomatoes. Grave robbers plunge their shovels into mounds of mulch and chew. She cringes, leaving a dying weed at the foot of an unborn way of life. So this is happiness, she thinks. So this is happiness. I want control. I want control. She wants control. Tomatoes.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth, and this is A Street Haunting. It all begins with Mrs. Dalloway and Wolf in a classroom of 3. Everything reads like sunsets, pinkening, then dark and murky, and we look at London on maps and try to imagine it. I can't sleep. The plane ride was uneventful, which is to say that it was expected, for a thrilling plane ride involves crashing or turbulence, and I'd much rather a crying baby than a nosedive. We land, we deplane, we arrive. I call my mother at customs. We stay in a neighborhood that's a soft introduction of the city, a scrape on the skin and quiet at night. They lock all the parks up at night, did you know that? They ring a little bell, and I want that little bell life, being rung to notify me of closings. I want that soft scrape of a life lived vaguely, in bits of life and piecemeal, a life lived as a tourist, not worrying about anything other than the street you're standing on and the place you occupy. I leave my door open as I unpack, and who I think is a Frenchman stops on the threshold. Good? He asks, holding out a package of melons. I look at the expiration date. Good, I nod. He thanks me and moves back out into life. Breakfast is in the basement, busy and full of strangers. There's a boy in brown hair and soft glasses who teaches me how to work the coffee maker, even though it is, as he says, a bit off-putting. He reaches underneath and lifts a large bucket of dirty coffee ground water and empties the tray into it, and suddenly it works. For some reason, people say British food isn't good. One morning, I see the Frenchman again. We look at each other, and he points to his plate, stacked with honeydew. Good, he says. Good, I reply. Somehow I find myself suddenly around someone who isn't a stranger, and we've only said one word. We tour in blinks of art and history and walking. The memories that melt together are discernible at the edges, and I know I was happy. I know everything bristled golden. Observing at the British Museum. The day is spectacularly nice, warm, cloudy, but not overcast, perfect for basking. This courtyard belongs to no one. It is an international no-man's land. How can I capture this feeling? There are 2 food trucks parked in the courtyard, with little cafe seating areas. The air smells like lit cigarettes and car exhaust in an ending day. The pervading faces in the crowd, perched on fences and stairs, lounging on the grass, is youth. Talking, touring, chatting, smoking, snacking, joking youth, shining with that glow of whatever joie de vivre you feel like calling it. I share my headphones coming back from Stratford, plugging in and dialing up familiarities in a night that is indistinguishable from itself, all blurring together like smudged ink until a passing car breaks the darkness before hurtling it off into it again. And is this what it feels like to be truly happy, or am I just tired and my expectations lowered? Why has England made me so happy when nothing else has even matched it by miles? Why do sleepy dawns by the canal and cobblestone sidewalks and slickly wet late nights emerging from the womb of the library before 2 a.m. food trucks and mist settling into the city give me a feel like I've not often felt at home? Why does it make me feel so damn content? What do you offer me that nothing else can? I don't understand it, but I can't stop loving it and what it made me. I can't help feeling that I left my bones there, and the rest of me has come back with nothing else to support it, and I'm left to flail and continue as if nothing has happened, and really nothing has happened, but also yes, everything has happened, and yes, everything has changed. There's the morning bus ride out of London, and we all stumbled to find Victoria Station with the red-haired baby in tow, oblivious to the frankly obscene time of day. Greenery flies by in the soft frozen dawn, and there are people I'll never meet, but who I've seen from windows, passing by without seeing me. If I had known them, I would have loved them. Isn't that what Whitman said once? I played the same song in the Relics. I played at Shakespeare's Bones. I played in London at night in the rain. The wine-deep vocals and the rolling, roiling sensation of calm happiness that feels as if an organ, wedged between my kidneys and everything else, is becoming a heat lamp. This organ swathed in linen in the summertime, with the breeze blowing through, soft trace of ripples that radiate outwards, like starbursts or the eyes of hurricanes. Maybe it is still, and everything else is born unceasingly back into the past. Or maybe not. Things I must remember. Remember that night we all walked out with the lavender and the dusk was coming, just not quite yet, and we walked through the closing part as night fell, and then the little bells rang. We talk of things, we talk of life outside this one, because we all know how temporary and shining a life it was, and we stumble back to the rooms among heavy and sweet flowers, the scents hanging in the air through open windows and wine fumes. Everything was pale blue and veiled, a darkness just behind it, hazy with cool morning and mist gathering on the stones as I slouched towards breakfast. Remember that last night in London, the night at the Stratbury, I kept the pen because they didn't ask for it back, and we wandered out hazy and bleary-eyed into our own designs and sights. We wandered at evening into St. James Park because I suggested it, because I dreamed of it, and I finally saw the murky, oily water stretch before me at the neck of sparkling, watery dusks, and reeds in the heron that I had explained to the second Frenchman of this story who'd never heard of the concept. We went out to the corner store because it was the last indulgence, and we wanted to feel like we were permanently there while being wiped away. London dying into evening is a beautiful tentative thing. Cold cream rubbed into its face as its makeup, dried out and blurred from the day, is wiped clean with the wet, bright nights, full of a slow softness of their own. I stood there in the park alone and listened to everyone leave one by one as ink bled into the paper. The flowers in bloom are only so in this moment. They will grow without me and be a temporary snap in the life of the passerby who see it. I've seen so many people I'll never know. I should have devoted more time to it. I should remember things more. It starts to rain out there on the last night, but not with us. We watch people go by down on the street. I didn't want to go out into them. I wanted to stay in the dim light in that moment. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to go.
Hi, I'm Kiri Kavinga. I, too, decided to change what I was going to read. It's actually 1 a.m. I'm a very impulsive person. Okay, so I'm going to read two things. The first one is called Faith Struggles. I stood in a corner next to a large yellow number 6, singing Days of Elijah and Shout to the Lord. None of the other children stood next to me. They all gave me a wide berth lest they catch my weirdness. Brenda, my Sunday school leader, would stand next to me for a minute, just long enough to tell me that they're playing If We Are the Body next, and that I should like that song. I stared as the children who ignored me lifted their hands and earnestly sang the song about how the members of the Christian body should reach out to people like me. 2 years later, people never ignored me. One morning, I said I wasn't feeling well and decided to hang back in the Sunday school classroom instead of going to worship and listen to the group sermon with all of my tormentors. I was alone for a minute, and it was a wonderful minute full of solitary praise to my Lord. However, my Sunday school teacher's daughter and her best friend came into the room and joined me. The moment I looked up and saw them, I was slapped to the floor, pinned on my stomach by the friend, while the daughter grabbed a green Expo marker and drew a slash across the back of my favorite shirt, given to me by my stepmother. The friend bounced on me as she got up, bruising my chest into the tile floor. The Sunday school teacher refused to believe that her daughter would do such a thing, and told me I was begging for attention. I went to the head of the Sunday school program at my Baptist church. She told me that I needed to man up.
If you tried not to be so weird, the other kids would like you more, Miss Faith told me. Since the Sunday school leaders didn't believe me, I doubted my mom would, so I didn't tell her. Instead, I pretended to be sick every Sunday. Mom believed me at first, but soon she was taking me to church, despite my complaints about illness and pain. I had to do something more drastic. I had to get out of going to church. So I mixed oatmeal and frozen corn in the toilet, showed Mom that I threw up. Should have realized that vomit doesn't smell like maple syrup and brown sugar, but I was desperate. Mom noticed, told me to put on a dress and grab my Bible. Eventually, the bullying got so bad that I took up a trick my babysitter taught me when I ate too much and my stomach was hurting because of it, sticking my middle finger down my throat and wiggling it until I actually puked. Whenever I did that, Mom believed me, so I kept at it until she decided I was old enough that she shouldn't force me to go to Sunday school. Although I desperately wanted the freedom she gave me, that space from God and His church made me feel distanced from Him. I started to believe that because I didn't subject myself to the bullying of His followers, I would end up in hell. I was in 7th grade at this point, and being bullied at school was enough for me. So despite this fear, I didn't go back to church. My fear grew, and I wrote my first poem. In the dark of the night, on that mystical beach, I looked and saw my fate. It was empty. It was cold. Although I wandered to and fro, no one was there. I was all alone. Filled with grief, I sank to my knees and begged for a second chance. Granted was my plea, but not forever was I free. In flames am I destined to be? Tears filled my eyes as I begged once again, please, give me one more chance. Again I was freed, and again I fell down to the fiery pit called hell. Then I realized I would never be by your side. Instead, I am tied to the beast of hell himself. In the dark, an endless night, my eternity I will spend in hell. It was horrible, as you would expect a first attempt at a poem to be, but I kept writing them. I needed a way to release the fears that I figured came standard with Christianity. And then the second one is a little bit shorter. It's called 2 Years. The house was at the bottom of a 60-degree hill. I slumped under the 2 right angles and entered the house. The wallpaper was straight lines, red and white, cold and calculated, evenly spaced. It was almost dinner time. I slowly sat my backpack down by the red sofa in the family room and set to work in the kitchen. I sliced mushrooms and onions haphazardly. None of the chunks were even or similar. I was hungry, but that didn't matter. As soon as I finished chopping a mushroom, I would check my phone, praying that someone had texted me so I could stop what I was doing and call them back. I had no messages. I added chopped romaine hearts to the bowls, and I poured in the onions and the mushrooms, slowly sprinkled cheese, and threw in cherry tomatoes. I pondered the 7 bowls for a couple of minutes. They had symmetrical patterns, squares and circles, each half reflecting the other. I brought them to his family in the living room where they were watching Wheel of Fortune. Each step made my left ankle ache. It still hadn't healed. The floor, covered with ivory squares, felt like ice, and its cold extended up into my legs and my knees. Despite my pain, I hastily returned. Back in the kitchen, I inhaled what I could of my salad, but not 15 seconds later he entered the kitchen and beckoned, as if slapping the air in the direction of the family room. I followed him, each step slower than the last, but fast enough so he wouldn't notice and grow angry. It was worse when he was angry. You didn't wear a skirt today. That's a problem. Strip, he whispered in my ear. Praying his parents would come and find us, I took off my pants and underwear and took up my place on the red sofa, evenly striped with vertical maroon bars. Remember, he glared at me, do not make a sound. The glare faded to a smirk, and he pulled out his uncircumcised bastard. Without regard for my health or safety, he took me. With each assault, tears were pumped from my eyes. He finished and nodded my way after he wiped my sin from him with a tissue. I staggered to the bathroom. The walls were similar and had a red and ivory pattern, matching the porcelain toilet. I doubled over myself, resting. While fighting tears and wiping them away, I saw my ankle. I reached into the cabinet under the sink and grabbed medicine tape and used it to secure toilet tissue over my cut. It's amazing how easy it is for fine lines formed by 2 razor blades to rip open. With the hope that I would not be connected to him forever, I went back to the kitchen. My salad tasted different now. The honey mustard salad dressing was warm. I threw it away and rinsed out my bowl. The freezing floor felt good this time, and it chilled my cuts as I entered the living room and sat on a brown corduroy sofa next to the adopted children. I steeled myself and looked at the youngest, a lovely blonde 7-year-old. "How are you, Rosie?" Good, she said, doing her best to ignore me, since the TV was still on. What did you learn in class? Anything fun? Shh, she put me in my place. Wheel of Fortune was still on TV. Annie pondered the letter she was given and the subject, holidays. This time, Rosie just declared, Happy Valentine's Day chocolates! Congratulations to the latest winner of Wheel of Fortune.
Wow, this is scary. My name is Clay Green, and this piece I'm going to read for you all was actually an entry in our journal that we have to keep for Dr. Taylor's class. And so when it came time to turn in an official assignment for her, I sifted through my journal and I found this, and I decided to expand upon it, so here we are. It's called The Best Place. My eyes followed the blades of the ceiling fan as they slowly spun in monotonous, endless motion. I was lying in bed, on the outside of the covers, still in the same clothes I had thrown on after I'd gotten off of work at midnight hours before. Thinking I'd arrive home to her car in my driveway, all I found was a blinking red light on my answering machine. She kept her voice level and distant as she broke my heart. Her message ending with a request to come collect some things in the morning and a faint sigh before hanging up. Dazed, I sauntered into my bedroom. My mind replayed her message, focusing on different pieces each time, particularly the words that began with the letter S. Serious, and space, and someone, followed sharply by else. And last but not least, sorry. I loosened my tie and put on an old blue t-shirt, the one she loved to borrow. With no intention of going to sleep, I climbed on top of my bed, folded my hands across my abdomen, and fell back through time to find exactly where things between us had gone wrong. I was blind to any sort of answer as I lay there in the dark, surrounded by little mementos of her. A pair of sunglasses she left on my desk, a novel she never finished gathering dust on the floor near my dresser, a striped scarf dangling off my coat rack, strands of her hair still clinging to my pillow. As orange remnants of daybreak began to pour through my curtainless window, I sat upright and swung my legs over the side of the bed, determined to escape this environment. I slid on my shoes, put on a fleece jacket, and reached for my car keys on my nightstand. It wasn't until I was sitting in my car that I realized I had no idea where I was heading. Thumping my forefingers anxiously on top of the steering wheel as I considered my options. My fingers stopped moving when I thought of a destination. The destination. Without another thought, I threw the transmission in reverse and backed out of the driveway. A picture of us fell from my visor as I pulled it down to shield my eyes from the rising sun. Taking everything I had, I tossed it over my shoulder to the back seat without looking at it before I shifted it into drive and proceeded down the desolate street. My car appeared to be the only one on the road, cruising quietly over the rolling hills as I left the suburbs behind. The shrubbery on the side of the road whooshed by as the trees further behind them took their time in crossing the horizon. As streaks of sunlight pierced through clouds that now formed and struck the road in bright blotches, I couldn't help but wonder what she would think when she'd arrive at my house and find me gone. Would she wait till I returned? Would she ask my neighbor to let her in? Would she simply leave and never come back again? Would she call me? Not wanting to dwell on these scenarios any more than I already had, I decided to switch my phone off before braking slightly as my turn approached on the right. Pulling the car off the road, I followed the winding path comprised of gravel and mulch. I slowed my speed as I passed through the open rusted gate, the faded image of a grinning green fish welcoming me from the gate's swinging sign that was held in place by zip ties. Though it was essentially useless, the town never tried to replace that old gate. Several of its residents claimed that maybe it's still there because it adds to the charm of the place. I drove on the narrow path that descended downward from the gate, lined with pine trees that seemed older than time itself. Their needles littered the ground no matter what time of year it was, and would lay there helplessly until the groundskeeper would come by once a month with a leaf blower. The path then opened up to the grand view, the lake, the epitome of my childhood, stretched out in such a way that it looked like a bird that had just been released from its cage. With the central circular component of the lake directly in front of me, its arms and legs, liberated and shameless, sprawled outward as they pushed back the red clay bank to make room for its expansive body. Its pockets of swampy marsh bled into the clear dark water and drifted like tectonic plates, only to have the process of perpetual, subtle circulation repeat itself ceaselessly. Parking the car near the wooden dock where fishermen and young lovers were usually camped, I got out and made for the taper walkway that extended out over the water like a toothpick. Still in my silent stupor, I took off my shoes and let my feet skim the cool water as I sat on the rickety dock's edge. I had taken her here once. Only once. More than a year ago, when we had just started seeing each other, I'd insisted that we pack a picnic and spend our Saturday off here during the height of spring. I spent the drive telling her stories of its place in my heart. The birthday parties held here where my friends and I would explore the woods until beckoned back by our chaperones. The afternoons after church where my father would take me fishing. The evenings after school dances where we would sit on blankets as we sipped whiskey and stole kisses. As I recounted some of the best moments of my adolescent life, she merely sat in the passenger seat and nodded with a small smile on her face, her thoughts obviously elsewhere. She seemed unimpressed once we were finally there, but refused to say it out loud. The day was eventually cut short after we had eaten our homemade sandwiches on one of the many wooden benches that overlooked the water. No longer feigning delight and stealing glances at her watch, she suggested we go before the non-existent rain began to fall. Annoyed but obliging, I drove us back to town with nothing to fill the silence but the sound of her fingernails furiously scratching a cluster of mosquito bites on her exposed legs. That was the last time I'd come here. Her unwillingness to see it as I saw it had robbed me of any inclination to return. As I sat reminiscing on the dock, with her no longer in my life, it seemed as if everything I'd missed out on over the past year flooded into perspective. The sun began to illuminate fiercely through the imposing blanket of gray cumulus clouds, making any attempt it could to remind the casual observer that it was indeed a Sunday. Despite the fact that it was now mid-morning, a carpet of mist hung just above the water's surface, and caressed it whenever a gust of wind gently flowed from between the trees surrounding the lake that guarded it like a dog does a newborn baby. I rested on my elbows, escaping everything, escaping her, at least for now, and was absorbed in what was happening around me. A family of ducks bathing under the cover of overhanging trees, the rhythmic swaying of the rentable rowboats that were tied to the end of the dock, the sudden emergence and disappearance of a turtle's head at the lake center, the rustle of tree branches as more wispy air blew through. It all enveloped me and held me transfixed in its state of perfect calm. Closing my eyes, I took a deep breath of the moist, green, sweet air and held it in for a moment or two before releasing it, getting drunk on my little corner of the world.
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Allie Keeter. It says Ari in the program, but it's Allie. This is a thing that I wrote for class off of the prompt. Write about two people on a destination. Just two people going somewhere. So this is 5 hours. I'm also really nervous, so just bear with. So just bear with me. Okay. Hour 1. We pull out of the driveway with a bitter silence between us. I know better than to talk, and she has her lips pursed in a way that she does when she's angry. Her lips are pushed out in almost a comical manner, with little lines forming around them, though she is years too young to have wrinkles. After a few moments, her face relaxes and she focuses her concentration on the road. The sun glares off of her obnoxious aviator sunglasses that I begged her to get rid of so many times. The silver lining of the glass is catching the sun and reflecting off of the plain gray dashboard of her old compact Honda. Taking my chances, I lean forward and fiddle with the radio before she swats my hand away. The metal of my ever-present bracelets clang against one another as my hand falls down to the center console. Don't you dare. You're the reason we're an hour late. I bring my hand back to my lap and pick at the skin around my thumbnails. The calluses around my fingers show evidence of years of this anxiety tic, but I rip the skin off in an instant. I look over at her to distract my eyes from the blood pooling around my cuticles. Every part of her has an air of anxiety. The little bit of toothpaste in the corner of her mouth, the flyaways in her thick curly hair, the twitching of her thigh as she speeds up and eases onto the highway. She ruffles her short fingers through her thick blonde hair that reaches down her back and flicks a few loose hairs in my direction before putting her hand back on the steering wheel. She isn't smiling, but her lips are no longer pursed. It's not much, but it's a small sign that she isn't mad at me anymore. Hour 2. She pulled her long hair into a side ponytail about 15 minutes after she let me turn on music, but huffed when I took out her Celine Dion Greatest Hits CD and told her I would put on something our parents wouldn't approve of.
We're not halfway there yet, and I can tell her nerves are growing as the clock and the odometer tick on. Her laugh, typically large and boisterous, has grown more shallow and high-pitched with each joke I tell, a vain attempt to ease her nerves. Her bottom lip is caught in the trap that is her teeth, and I know that soon her lip will bleed, and she'll be angry about that too. I reach over and place my hand on her knee, which she shakes off immediately. She manages to look hard, in a sense, even now when she's wearing a dress. She's classically beautiful, especially now, something I've always admired about her, but her curt personality, brash language, and no business attitude have always made her look as callous as my fingernails. I'm sorry I was late. I don't whisper it, but it's barely heard over the electronic music I force onto the stereo. She taps her fingers against the steering wheel in a repeated pattern, each finger tapping twice on each hand before she answers. Another one of her tells. It's okay. I know you didn't do it to hurt me or upset me. She's reminding herself more than she's assuring me, but I accept it all the same. Hour 3. She has repeated that we should make it on time 4 times now, twice for herself and twice for me. I've taken to putting on my makeup so that I could save us even more time when we get there. I've been reminded that it will be starting right when we arrive and we won't have time to change or fix our hair. She says this, and I see her hazel eye slide in my direction underneath the hideous sunglasses. I brush my fingers through my hair as though that would even out the asymmetrical haircut and provide me with something her family would approve of. I look in the stained and speckled car mirror and push mascara through my eyelashes as slowly as I can in a vehicle moving over 70 miles per hour without permanently blinding myself. I fail miserably when she switches lanes, and I almost hear her hiding a laugh as I curse several deities in the process of scrubbing the black makeup off of my cheek and blink it out of my eye. I look at myself in the mirror once I'm done and take a deep breath as my fingers shakily go through the parts of my hair that were once dyed blonde. I let out a deep sigh and look over to her. Her fingers are tapping again, but she steals a glance in my direction. You look beautiful. It doesn't happen often, but I know she means it, especially right now. Hour 4. She's taken her hair out of a ponytail and put it back up at least 3 times before I reminded her to keep her hands on the wheel and her eyes on the road. The skirt of her dress is hitched above her thighs now, and her knees are waves crashing together, the accelerator long forgotten in favor of the cruise control. A bead of sweat drags down her face as she fiddles with the air conditioner once again, but we both know that the chances of that turning on are the same as us making it on time. She lets out a mixture of grumbling noises, mixed in with a few swears as she fans her hand in front of her face. The curls are sticking to her neck and make shapes like clouds do on calm afternoons. I roll down the window for relief, but I was quickly reprimanded because I know what that does to her hair. I put the Celine Dion CD back in, and this calms her down enough to hold my hand for the next half hour. Hour 5. We are almost there, and the car is one heartbeat accelerating down the freeway looking for exit 75. We crossed the state line over an hour ago. I encouraged her to stop for a moment to use the bathroom and touch up her makeup. She tried to hide the sobs in her chest from both of us, but I heard them the second the door shut. When she exited, I brushed her hair out of her face, and she gave me a weak smile, her thin lips curling around her teeth. She looked more like an animal waiting to attack her prey rather than a convincingly happy human being. Her mask is on, and this is her way of being ready to see them. She openly acknowledged the fact that we were going to be 15 minutes late with an open sigh and a heavy swig of coffee, but I noticed the pressure on the accelerator increasing nonetheless. My suit jacket is heavy on my shoulders, and I can feel the sweat seeping through the thick fabric under my arms. I shift and adjust myself again once we exit. I have counted the amount of breaths she's taken since we've exited. About 5 miles away, and she has taken 10 deep breaths and shed 4 singular tears. The sunglasses were shed as we pull into the parking lot, and she fiddles with the hem of her dress, willing it to be a few inches longer. She turns and locks her hazel eyes with my brown eyes before letting out one last exhale and exiting the car. I walk a few paces behind her and let her find her bearings again. This is new territory to me, but this is her home. She turns around and extends her hand. My eyes are almost as wide as a cartoon character as I grab it, knowing how she feels. He would have loved you, she whispered as we entered the church. I hand her one of the 2 pamphlets that I was handed as we entered, both bearing her father's face on the front.
Hello. My name is Denitria Barnett, and this is a monologue from the point of view of a siren. This is my shipyard, full of murky black clouds blinding the sailors that come down here. It's different than the pristine blues and greens of the waters back home. It's peaceful. The shimmer of the minnows swimming are missed here, and not a clicking crawfish comes into sight. I pass the coral-colored reefs on my way here every time, and I wonder if they long to scuttle somewhere else, or if they lie lazy and content as the barnacles latch to them and eat them bit by bit. The yard falls past my cove of knickknacks, tiny baubles and items which satisfy me no longer. They are dead. Where I once wondered about the lives of humans and what knowledge lay within a single waxy stick, I no longer wish to peruse the uneven curves of flat rock jutting out to the center of the cave. My toys lay lifeless on the sandy shelves, curved around this hole and spiraling downward into the abyss. I can only see around fresh ships in the yard. I hide far away while the boat drifts into place among the others, and I return only hours after the yelling has ceased. There has yet to be a shipment of people who have my gills, or who do not scurry away to shiver on smaller boats or the rocks above. I have begun to wonder if they find underwater life as terrifying as I do. When the ships fall into their crevices, the dark sludge of older treasures makes it difficult to pillage. A fog of grainy black dust usually clouds my view, and I am lost for hours bumping around hard pieces of expanded wood or through the large holes of big-bellied blankets that once carried these vessels on the open air. Up there is a prince. I have seen him when the ships down here no longer interest me, and I can no longer swim around the others, dancing across flounders and avoiding the fish with hooks for scales if you happen to brush them the wrong way. I have heard him called Alan by the other subjects on the ship. His hair glistens like oil, waves of black following his hand backward as he moves the small tendrils from his face. I can trace his jawbone from memory, and whenever he deigns to let the sea mist splatter onto his face, I can craft his eyes from the lost emeralds near the sandy bottom. He changes shape too often. There are days where he does not cross his arms over the bow of the ship, but hurries busily from one end of the ship to the other. This is when his skin matches the wet figureheads growing algae between their eyelids. His head is shaved almost smooth, and when his brow matches the mountains of seismic terror, he rubs his scalp swiftly and drops his muscled forearms back down to his side. Only when the sun is high and forgotten by clouds do I see his golden-haired form on the upper decks, heaving bundles of ropes tightly with the other sailors. On these days, his hair looks fresh tousled from bed, and when the sunlight plasters his face, each strand shimmers against the sea. I long to dance in his light. Too often, I find myself mesmerized by the blues of his eyes, and my skin begins to feel like dried clay. I do not like the way the fresh air makes my hair reek of seaweed and fish sweat. The water from my scalp sinks back down to my shoulders, reaching back towards its familiar territory, but I wish to stay a little longer. Breaching feels as natural as breathing. Once I stayed draped across a jagged rock formation for so long my hair stood up on all sides. My ends began to crack and splinter from the dry air, and my father later asked me why my locks no longer flipped through the water as easily as my tail. Before these princes catch a glimpse of my scales, I dive back down, spiraling and looping around myself in laughter. I corkscrew through rough, scratchy openings of rock as the bubbles swirl around me fast. They tingle like my mother's hands, tickling me all over until my neck cramps tightly from curling into myself, and I giggle until my face turns as red as the anemones. Afterwards, I can often find a boulder, smoothed by the ever-changing currents. I lay open, arms stretched, and imagine what it would feel like to breathe in the warmth of the sun's rays. I think of my mother's hugs, when she'd gather all my sisters and me in her arms and let her hair drape over us. She beamed, absolutely radiant. I wonder if she reached for the light or the water when she left. No more wondering. I ran across a sea witch when the moon lay only at half-mast. Her palms brushed like soft seaweed from my shoulder to my fingertips and grasped my hand tightly. As I tried to pull away, the whites of her eyes blended into her iris and shone a brilliant violet, loosening all of the tension in me. Her dark hair flew out from her skull on all sides like tentacles, slowly enveloping their prey. As I drift, paralyzed, she named me lost and wishful. At the yellow caverns, I sang to her under the rising full moon while my tail became two lesser fins. I must find the surface soon. I am choking. gasping, drowning.
I think that's it. What time is it?
8:15.
Oh, gosh. 3:15? Oh, okay, well, we can retain a couple of questions, or the students can talk about how they had come to do these pieces. I know, or do you want to do that, or no? You can say no.
I mean, if they have questions.
Yeah, anybody have questions about these pieces? Yeah. I will say, these are really worked on. You know, they start sometimes with the draft. Yes? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Yes.
It was really well done. But what were the inspirations behind you guys' pieces? I'm curious for each one.
All right, let's go
Yeah.
in order.
Okay. Yeah.
I am not going first.
And maybe turn around so you can talk to the audience here.
Oh, I mean, in all honesty, I was watching a TV episode where people were going to a funeral, and what was happening, and it made me think of a road trip that my parents take between Texas to Oklahoma that takes 5 hours, and I was like, oh, well, I wonder what would happen, and then just out of nowhere, it was a thing. It's not based on real life, so my dad is alive.
Okay.
For my first piece, I actually had a great-grandfather who lived in St. Louis during the Great Depression, who had a gambling addiction and gambled away all the family's money, and eventually ended up in an insane asylum, probably with something like bipolar disorder, but they didn't know what that was back then. So I wanted to write something about that. And then the second piece, I actually, there was a kid on my brother's soccer team when I was a kid whose father did kill himself, and it was like a kind of a throwaway mention when I was a kid. I didn't really know much about it, and for some reason it came back to me earlier this semester, and I decided to write something about that.
Yeah, my inspiration isn't too deep. The lake that I depicted was just an actual place it's in my hometown, and so I kind of like channeled that because that's usually where I go from like stressed out or something like that. So I just wanted to.
Whenever you get heartlessly dumped.
Exactly. Whenever you get heartlessly dumped. So yeah, I just use that as the main source. Do something with it.
Hey, so mine came from after we read this piece about hair and like this daughter and mother's hair in our class. Like, we got the prompt like, oh, write about something that runs in a family. And so I was originally going to do like some weird story about like a family where all of the women are cursed, and then it ended up being about cancer. And yay, I made it all up, guys. It's all me.
My grandmother told me that my great 4 times grandma was a slave in Georgia, and she had kids by their master. So I just kind of tried to explore what if me and my great 4 times grandma were sisters, and just kind of flip from there.
Mine is based on a trip to London that I took in the summer, and then partially when I stayed in Oxford, studied abroad last semester.
Mine was from a prompt in one of the books for our class, which talked about personas, which are monologues or stories from the point of view of a mythical creature or a character. And then I just had the Little Mermaid on the brain, and that's what came out of it.
Mine was basically just a true story of what goes on in my brain. So.
That's all.
My first one, the one about faith, is autobiographical. The second one, I'm not going to say who for their privacy, but it's the story of someone that I know.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or,
Good question.
Yes.
Can I just say, as someone who works with children, small children, you are all amazing.
We're all
absolutely
small
no,
children.
you're not. One of them I know personally, and yes, she is still a small child in my mind. But as somebody who works and talks and speaks in front of people a lot and coaches drama and that type of thing, you all are amazing. I want you to know that about yourself. I know how difficult it is to stand in front of the room and to deliver a piece that's something that means something to you. But you all come across with so much confidence. And I need you to remember that when you're up there. Thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely counts. That's my hard-earned teacher.